So it's Wednesday morning, the 25th of March, and I'm down here in the basement, um, social distancing. Um, anyway, this is not meant to be a tour of my messy basement. I'm just sort of going to document for myself, or document and make a video record for myself of what I plan on doing. Um, but anyway. I'm here in Pittsburgh, avoiding contact with people. My wife, who is very high risk, is holed up in a cabin in the woods in West Virginia with the dogs. And so I'm down here in the basement. And this camera that I'm using, this little action camera, which is about the size of a box that Matchbox cars used to come in, it's got this little wide-angle lens, which probably great for if you're skiing down a mountainside, or what I bought it for is I strap it to my chest now if I'm out riding the motorcycle, because a couple of years ago I was on one of the few stretches of straight road here in western Pennsylvania, alongside I think it was along the Monongahela River, but a little stretch of straight road. There was nobody behind me and nobody in front of me, and coming the other way, nobody except this yellow car in the distance, which turned out to be somebody's antique muscle car of some kind. So I'm going down the middle of my lane, and this guy's coming down the middle of his lane, and then some distance in front of me, he crosses over the center line, straddled the center line. So I saw that, and I started to he stayed there. I started to slow down and move over to the right, and he came down that straddling the center line, and then right before he got to me, he moved back into his lane and goes by with this big grin on his face when I'm slowing down to about 5 miles an hour on the side of the road. And ever since then, I bought this little camera at Aldi's actually, but I strap it to my chest when I'm on my motorcycle, and I don't ride very often, but anyway, that's what I have it for. But inside, this little wide-angle lens really distorts things. For example, my coffee mug is not really that big. This looks like I could jump inside it, but it's not that big. But anyway, I thought I would bring it down here and document what I'm doing. So I recently completed these cabinets, little cupboards with glass paneled front doors, and so they're sitting here, and they're going to sit there until I either put them up on the wall or give them away to somebody else who can put them up on a wall. But now that sort of frees me up to work on other projects. So this miniature highboy I finished this past year, and that's eventually going to get to a granddaughter in Texas. This cabinet right here is also something I think I finished this past year. This is meant to be a tool cabinet. It's made out of walnut. It's pretty big, so I got to make some arrangement to mount this on a wall and get one of my sons over to help me lift it. And anyway, so it sits there. But anyway, so what I'm going to work on is this, and this is a desk. Well, someday it'll be a desk that I started building years ago. I took a class in Winchester, Virginia, and this was it's a slant front desk, 18th century slant front desk, and so it was a week-long class I took with a few other people in Winchester, and the two guys who teach the class, they don't run a school. They just have a class once in a while, I think, to supplement their income. But they mainly They build 18th century furniture and restore antiques. And this is made out of walnut. I think most people used, well, the other 3 or 4 guys used cherry or mahogany maybe. But anyway, I use walnuts, a little easier. I like cherry, but walnuts a little easier to work with. Anyway, at the end of the class, all that was done really was the basic frame, you know, all this and this top piece, and I think we had made these 2 dividers. But the feet weren't done and weren't installed, so sometime within the past couple of years, I had one of my sons come over and we flipped this upside down, and I installed these feet and this molding, and then we flipped it right side up again, and I had built this dolly to move it around. Anyway, so I made this some years ago, and I think one of the first things I worked on when I came back, just because it was more interesting, I thought, I mean, these big drawers are I just didn't want to get to them. So this area up here, referred to as the gallery, you know, had these little dividers and these little drawers, and this big opening right here has this big box. I don't know if it's too dark back here to see this, but this big box sits in it with these 2 drawers go in here, and this box actually, these are there are 10 hand-cut dovetails here on each edge. So there are 40 hand-cut dovetails here, and then these drawers and that little divider in there, and there's some other little details there. Anyway, I did all of this, and I did all of these drawers and dividers, and then I set this aside, and sat there for a while. And then we went away for a few days, and upon returning, found that a valve in the refrigerator had frozen. You know, it's where there's a copper line coming into the refrigerator, you know, coming into the back of the refrigerator, and then plastic tubing inside the refrigerator that fed water to the water dispenser and the ice maker. Anyway, something inside the refrigerator had broken, had frozen, which of course broke the connection in there. So while we were away, you know, under city water pressure, water was just blowing into the refrigerator, and of course finding its way out. So when we came home, the kitchen floor was flooded. And yeah, this is an old house. It's well, it's about 95 years old. It was built in the 1920s, and you know, all hardwood floor and you know, oak floor. Fortunately, I suppose, the water had not gone into the kitchen and had not come down the hallway into the living room. But you know, water wants to find its lowest level, so it managed to find its way through the wall behind the refrigerator. And so, excuse me, I came downstairs to turn off the water valve, you know, from you know, where the water comes in from the street. And what I found when I came down here to the basement was that there was an absolute waterfall coming out of the ceiling, just pouring out of the ceiling. And directly below the waterfall was this desk. And that was pretty disappointing because everything was just saturated. And so I turned off the water, and fortunately down here, I mean, half the basement was flooded, but this construction being what it is, the basement concrete floors down here are sloped, have sort of a gradual slope to a floor drain. So most of the water went down the drain. But there were a lot of things ruined down here, and I mean, it was a mess. And of course, turning off the water didn't stop the waterfall. That water just continued to pour out of the ceiling for a little while. I mean, I think I probably moved this out of the way a little bit, but there wasn't much point because it was just soaked. And so I sent a note to Jeff Headley, the guy that was teaching the class. I said, you know, I'm heartbroken. My desk is ruined. And he sent back a note saying, well, maybe it's not ruined. Just let it dry out and see what you've got. So I set it aside, and probably after a few months, it had dried out. But it has sat, other than me putting the feet on a couple of years ago, this desk has sat here for a few years, and there's some obvious damage. Up here, you know, these dovetails had started to lift a little bit, so I planed them back down, but then they were still lifted a little bit. So I don't know if I think the water probably